our study through the Baptist Faith and Message. We are getting ever so closer to the end of this study. We are at Article 16 tonight, Article 16 of the Baptist Faith and Message. And y'all have heard me say many times the Baptist Faith and Message is really just, it's a document containing of what Southern Baptists hold to. They are very clear on some subjects and they are very broad on other subjects. And the reason why is because the goal of the Baptist Faith and Message is to bring as many churches as possible together to cooperate together. That is the goal. And so when we get to our article tonight, you're going to see one of the examples of a very broad one. It is a very broad subject. And because in this article, you will find some that are on opposite ends, but yet we're all together on this. And so you'll understand when I get into it, especially you'll probably understand when I give you the title of the article. All right? The title of Article 16 is this: Peace and War. All right? Peace and war. What is it that Baptists, or Southern Baptists in particular, believe when it comes to peace and war? What does the Bible have to say about peace and war and a Christian's position on peace and war? Well, this is what the Baptist Faith and Message says on peace and war. Article 16. Believe it or not, it's one of the shortest articles. Such a big subject. All right? But you'll see that my notes are not near short. I know that shocks some of you. But we'll see. Here it is. It is the duty of Christians to seek peace with all men on principles of righteousness. In accordance with the Spirit and the teachings of Christ, they should do all in their power to put an end to war. The true remedy for the war spirit is the gospel of our Lord. The supreme need of the world is the acceptance of His teachings in all affairs of men and nations, and the practical application of His law of love. Christian people throughout the world should pray for the reign of the Prince of Peace. That is what it says about peace and war. Now, we all know this is a very deep subject with many different sides of it, and so I'm going to do my best to try to explain how such a broad issue can be condensed in such a small little article as we see here in the Baptist Faith and Message. First thing that I want to address is the priority of peace. When you read this article, that is something that you recognize right off the bat, is that Baptists make peace a priority. In fact, that is the topic of it. That's the whole point. It's peace, 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 peace. Every sentence mentions peace, and there's a reason for that. That is the priority. All Christians are called to peace. We, as Christians, accept Jesus Christ into our heart in faith, and Christ is referred to as the Prince of what? Peace. It says it right there in the end of the article. He is the Prince of Peace. And if He is the one that is ruling and reigning in your heart, then guess what your heart should be set on? Peace. It's not that complicated. We are called to be peacemakers. Jesus said in Matthew 5:9, "Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called the sons of God." Believers and Christians are called to peace. That should be what we champion at all times. We are not war hungry. We are not warmongers. That is not what Christians are supposed to be. We are the opposite. We are all about peace. Matthew 5:38 through 39. You have heard that it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. We are to seek peace, always looking for ways of peace. In fact, it doesn't get any clearer than what the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 12. If possible, on your part, live at peace with everyone, or all, depending on the translation. And do you want to know what everyone and all actually means in the Hebrew and in the Greek? Everyone and all. He's serious about that. But notice that little caveats that he throws there, if possible, as for you. Why would Paul say if possible and as for you? Because there's some people that are not for peace. There are some people that will not give you the opportunity for peace. There are some people in this world that are just evil. We live in a fallen and broken world. And so that is why the Apostle Paul, in the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, says, if possible, on your part, because there are some people that are not going to do it. That is the reality. And so with that understanding, even though we know that it is our priority as Christians to seek peace, this is where the Baptist Faith and Message has to try to corral as many believers as possible. Because in Southern Baptist life, you are going to have some people that are referred to as pacifists and some people who are not. And in Baptist churches, you will find some that are pacifists, which means they are opposed to all war. All war. But then there are others in our same denomination that are not pacifists. But yet we are all in the same denomination. We all hold to the same scriptures. And this article tries its best to corral all of us together. And in my opinion, does a really good job at it. Because it focuses in on the peace aspect, but at no point does it declare there is no such thing as war. It doesn't do that either. And so it walks that very fine, thin line. It straddles that fence between peace and war. And the goal is to try to keep everyone together. That's the point. And not draw a specific line to divide the churches or the memberships of the churches. All right, so being that I've mentioned pacifism, let's address pacifism first. To be consistent, pacifists must oppose not only an offensive war, but they must also oppose a what? A defensive war. Pacifism, by definition, is rejecting all war. All wars. That's war for righteousness, defense, everything. A pacifist will not fight. That is the reality of what that definition means. So, one of the Southern Seminary presidents, been there for years, and one of the leading theologians in Southern Baptist life currently is Dr. Albert Mohler. Dr. Albert Mohler said this about pacifism or pacifist. Pacifists claim that war can never be justified, whatever the cause or conditions. But he added, the moral failure of pacifism is found in its deadly naivism, not in its abhorrence to violence. In reality, the world is a violent place where humans with evil intent will make war on others. In such a world, respect for human life sometimes requires the taking of human life. That tragic fact is as clearly revealed in the history as in any other, and far more than most. Pacifism ultimately fails to keep the peace against those who would take your peace. It's a good statement. And Mohler's not wrong on it. And so pacifism as a doctrine does not resist evil. That is just a part of it. Just to sort of let you know where I stand on this issue, I am not a pacifist. That is not what I am. I'm not a warmonger at all. I'm actually the opposite. I strive for peace in every single situation. But I'm also not blind to the reality that we live in a broken and fallen world. Just as Mohler says, we are in an evil world, and there are some people that will not let you live in peace. They are determined to not let you live in peace. And so, with that understanding, I wanted to give you some other examples of this or other quotes that go along with this. Edmund Burke is a famous theologian in the past, and he said this. You'll recognize this quote. It's rather famous. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. It's a fact. That's the only thing necessary for evil to win is for good men to do nothing. Martin Luther King Jr. said, the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression of and cruelty by bad people, but the utter silence from the good people. It's true. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is where Martin Luther King Jr. got that statement. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pastor, Lutheran pastor in Germany, who actually did a plot to try to kill Hitler, said this: silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Martin Niemöller, another Lutheran pastor during the time of World War II in Germany, said this: first, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I'm not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. It's true. So, the opposite view of pacifism is that they justify almost every war. And that's the opposite, the warmonger side of it. And let me be very frank and honest. There is no such place for anyone in Christianity that is a warmonger, someone who seeks war. It should be the very last thing you ever see. That's like when I look on social media and I see fools that will say, man, we need a civil war, we need a revolution. And I just want to say, y'all are idiots. While I admit our country's in a rough spot and we got some issues to fight and figure out, that is not a good option. That's the worst option. And the thing is, America has been so separated from war and our own streets that we have forgotten just how devastating it is and how there will be many innocents that will be harmed. And so war is not something that you should ever want. The majority, when it comes to war, do you realize that the majority of war is always fought over three things? Greed, power, and money. It's really it. Greed, which sort of falls in under money anyway, or financial gain, but it's greed and power is really what it all comes down to when it comes to war. Many secularists will claim that religion is one of the main causes of war, and I will tell you as a man of faith and religion that that is simply not true. That is them spinning truth. That's them spinning this to them. Religion throughout the history of the world has been corrupted by rulers of authority that want to use religion as a tool or an instrument to gain power and wealth. And so what they will do is they will rally up and do exactly what Satan does in Scripture. He will throw out a verse or two. He will twist Scripture. He will give you a couple that is just surrounded by a bunch of lies, y'all. And that's what they do. And they will drum up as many Christians as possible to support them, even though the intent behind the war is not right, nor is it good. That happens a lot. And unfortunately, it's not a good thing. I'll give you an example of what is almost always thrown out as evidence that religion is nothing but warmongering. How many of you have ever heard of the Crusades? Of course, you've heard of it tons of times. And that is the one that almost every atheist or secularist will always throw into your face. And as my job as a pastor, I'm supposed to teach you how to defend your faith. All right, well, let me explain to you about the Crusades. Y'all know me. I love history. I study history all the time. Let me explain to you how this happened. Prior to Muhammad, well, actually, it was after Muhammad, but prior to his death, Muslims, Jews, and Christians all lived in Jerusalem together. All three of the world's top religions lived in one city, and all three religions believed that one city was very holy. And so Jews, Muslims, Christians all lived there together. But one thing happened when it came to Islam. Islam believes that through the power of sword and through war, you should make infidels, unbelievers, believers. And if they refuse to believe, you are to kill them. That is what they believe. And so what we refer to as a jihad took place. And so Muhammad and his minions began to spread Islam not only in the Middle East, but they took over Turkey, they took over all of northern Africa, they advanced up through the Rock of Gibraltar into Spain, and they went all the way up into France, and it was Charlemagne with others in France that were finally able to stop the Muslim advance into Europe. They went all the way past through Constantinople. Roman Church of Catholicism had basically been destroyed. Islam had gone up there, but they finally stopped it. And then about 50 to 60 years after that, Christians wanted to go to Jerusalem. but they couldn't get to Jerusalem because they were being attacked when they got there. And so people known as crusaders would rise up and they would go. How many of you ever heard Knights of the Templar? All right. They began as a good organization. I'll get later into it's a whole other conversation about them. But regardless, they started off very good. Their whole goal was to follow people who were going on journeys, trips, I forget what you call them, pilgrimages, thank you. Pilgrimages. They would go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and these Knights of the Templar, and there was actually 3 different types, they would follow these pilgrims and protect them. That's their whole job. And eventually, the Roman Catholics, along with the other leaders, see, you got to understand, the Roman Catholics, they became very political. The Pope became very political. And there's a reason there's a separation between church and state. And so the Pope became very political, along with the other ones, and they decided, you know what? We need to take Jerusalem back. And so that's how the Crusades began, is to go back and try to take over. And they would try it and try it and try it. Sometimes they'd win, sometimes they would fail. Most of the time they would end up failing. But every bit of that holy war got started that way. But here's the deal. Do you know why Muhammad took over so much? And do you know why the Pope and along with the Christian kings decided to go back into Jerusalem? Greed and power. But they used their religion to do it. And so it's not that religion is bad. It's the fact that we live in a corrupt and fallen world, and they abuse religion and use religion to stir people up. Because they figured out nobody is going to fight to get you more money. I love you, Dennis, but I'm not going to kill people to get you more power and money. I don't care about you that much. All right? But if Dennis was to come to me and say, Mahlon, I believe Jesus wants us to have this. So now it's not about greed and money. Now it's about my faith. Guess what? You can get some people to sign up on that. And that's how it happens. The real root cause is greed and power. It's sin. That is what the majority of wars, think about it. The majority of wars in this world, what are they based on? Power, greed. That is what it's all about. Power and greed. And so you have 2 views. You got the pacifist and you got the war-hungry people, all right? And both of them are sitting there going against each other. So what they decided to do in Christianity well over a couple centuries ago, in fact, it was in the 4th and 5th century that one of the church's greatest thinkers, Augustine of Hippo, all right? Augustine of Hippo. He is the first one to come up with what is known as the principles of a just war. Because people began to ask the question, is pacifism the way we got to go? What about evil people in an evil world? How do we fight if we're pacifists? And then over here, why are they fighting over these wars for greed and power? That's not of God. So what is a Christian supposed to do when it comes to peace and war? Augustine of Hippo in the 4th and 5th century came up what is known as the principles of just war. And the reality is we still hold to it today. We fell holding to it a lot, but it's there and we acknowledge it. And so I'm going to read you what was written back in the 4th and early 5th century by Augustine of Hippo on what are the principles of a just war. So, and to let you understand what I'm about to read you, this is what, if you want to know if a war is just or not, this is the criteria the church holds to. A just war. Number 1, when it comes to a just war, the cause of initiating a war must be just. That is, it cannot be for aggressive purposes, but rather for defense and protection of the innocent. If a war is not for defense or the specific protection of innocence, it is not just. 2, war cannot be initiated justly except by those who hold the proper authority and responsibility. This is actually something that our Christian founders of America put in the United States Constitution. We argue and debate this in politics all the time. Who is supposed to have the right to declare war? Anybody that's a constitutionist know? Congress. Do they always do that? No, because we got idiots in the office that refuse to follow the Constitution. I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. But regardless, according to the Constitution, Congress has the authority. And according to Hippo, back in the 4th century, he declares that only those in proper authority and who have the responsibility can declare a war and it be just. What he is saying is, if you don't have the proper authority and you declare war, it's not just. It's just not. That's what he says. And so what he's talking about here is something that you find in Romans 13, and I'll get to that in a minute. The Bible tells us who has the authority to declare war. All right? And that is where Augustine the Hippo gets this. Only certain people have the ability. What he's saying is you can't have just a random person stand up and declare war and it be just. They have to have authority given to them by God, according to Augustine. Now, again, y'all, this was written back in the 3rd or the 4th and 5th century. Some of you may want to debate this. That's why this article is very broad. Some of you are going to fall more on the pacifist side. Some of you may fall more on the war hunger side. All right? But this is it. Third, the moral merit of our side, the Christian side of the war, must clearly outweigh the moral merit of the other side. Isn't that interesting? I actually like that Hippo does this. It reminds me of an old movie. And I say old movie. It's not really old. It's a Mel Gibson movie. He's in Vietnam. He's an airborne helicopter pilot. What's the name of it? We Were Soldiers. Great movie. One of my favorite scenes in that movie. I mean, absolute favorite. And y'all ain't even going to think about this scene, but I love it because I'm a preacher. All right? Mel Gibson is sitting there. He's getting ready to go to war. One of his soldiers just had a baby. If you remember in the movie, he's there at the hospital, and the daddy is a brand new daddy. He's fretting. He's all nervous and anxious and whatever. And Mel Gibson, in that classic role of that general, he goes, or major, whatever he was, and he goes, well, let's just pray about it. And the kid was shocked. And so let's get up there and let's pray. So he starts praying. And say, God, do this, and when we go to war, blah, blah. And then before he closes it, he's about to close the prayer, and he pauses, and he says, and God, don't you listen to the prayers of them heathens. I will never forget that quote. It's a great line. And that's why Hippo says what he does in this. Because the reality of war is, it depends on what side you're on, who's the good ones. And so Hippo acknowledges this. Augustine does. And he says, if it's going to be a just war, your side, justice, must outweigh their side. Because both of them are going to have propaganda and spin it. And so that is what Augustine the Hippo declares. Your merit, your reason, your justice for fighting this war must clearly be greater than theirs. Because if theirs is more just, then it's not a just war. Don't fight it. That is what Hippo says. 4, war can only be declared with the right intention, which is to abstain and or restore peace. That's it. You want to know the reason why a war should be just or not? To maintain and to restore peace. That's it. If it's to conquer this land because I need more money, or because they have oil, or because they have minerals, or whatever it is, or it's a strategic place against this one over there, it's not just. It may be worldly just. It may make sense to our current culture, but that doesn't mean it's biblical. It doesn't mean it's a just war. And so that's what Hippo says. Also, number 5, war must be the last resort. If it's a just war, that means you have tried everything possible to keep from it. And that goes directly back to what Paul said in Romans. If possible, as much as it depends on you, what? Be at peace with everyone. Well, you cannot hold to that if you didn't strive for peace before you went to war. So if your first reaction is, well, I'm just mad and we're going to fight. No. Your first responsibility is peace. If you're a Christian, that's your first responsibility. It's to seek peace, and war is to be the absolute last resort, if it's to be just. Number 6, Hippo said, war cannot be justified if the prospect of success is hopeless. That's a tough one, because I'm a fighter. I just am, y'all. It's way down deep in me, and I've tried to get it out of me. But what Hippo says, he's not wrong. If you know for a fact it's impossible to win, Hippo says it's not a just war if you fight. And the reason why is because the cost of life is greater than anything that you can try to win. And so if it's a lost cause, why are you killing people? That's his point. And so it's a tough one, but he's not wrong. If it's a just war, there must be a chance for victory. You can't just, you can't just throw it all away for nothing. Number 7, and the last one that Hippo says for a just war. War should be seen as a tragic necessity and not as an aggressive opportunity. We've sort of already addressed that one. The whole point is that we are to be driven by the principle of peace, and we only go into war reluctantly and not eagerly. If you are going into war eagerly, then you're already wrong. It should be the last thing you want to do. It doesn't mean it's not time to do it, because the Bible clearly says there is a season for peace and a season for what? War. But you should never go in eagerly. That's why I always look at these people that get so excited about some of this, and I'm thinking, y'all, this is not a good thing. You do not understand. So, scriptural support for this. The whole point is, where do we find this in the Bible? What's the scripture behind it? Well, one of the main ones, other than the ones I've already given you, the main ones that you're going to need to look up is Romans chapter 13. And Romans 13, verses 1 through 7 is where you're going to find the majority of the scriptural reference when it comes to war and who has the authority and all of it. And let me read it to you. Romans 13, starting in verse 1. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God. And they who have opposed all will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render all what is due to them. Tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. That is what the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. And so what the Apostle Paul clearly does here in this passage is he establishes the government as the clear authority who can declare war. They are the ones that have that ability. They're the ones that are supposed to do it. Notice one thing that I always like to remind people, the word translated sword in the Greek is maturia, all right? That word is very unique when it comes to swords, because it's not the sword that a soldier carries into battle, all right? It's a sword that they usually used for protection of other authorities, like the emperor. So a soldier that is standing in protection would have one, and it was also used for execution. And so that was the primary use of that particular sword, and that's what he's saying there. And again, this goes back to what August of Hippo said. It's supposed to be for defense, and that's what that sword was mainly used for. It's for defending and for executing when it was time to do it. And so what Paul is talking about here, the government has the sword, and that is for enemies both foreign and domestic. All right? So they are to protect. The government has it. So if, let's just say, an evil person rises up somewhere in the world, let's just say that Iran, China, Russia, you pick one. One of them decides, you know what, we're coming and we're going to kill everybody in the United States because we just don't like the people in the United States. Guess whose job, according to the Bible, it is to protect us? The United States government. They have that right. And so we, as Americans, are to honor whom deserves honor, pay taxes to who pay taxes, all of that. We are to follow them for conscience sake because that's the one God gives us. So, if our country goes to war, we as Christians have the responsibility to stand up and to do what our government asks us to do. That's just part of it. So, I forget the name off the top of my head. They made a great movie about him. What's the guy that had the Medal of Honor? He was a pacifist, but he went as a medic into the military in Korea. Hacksaw Ridge is the movie, but do you remember his name? Huh? Yeah. Well, all right, that's the one I'm talking about. He's a real-life hero. I mean, he did stuff that just boggles your mind. But he was a pacifist. He was a Christian, a very devout Christian, and he refused to kill anybody. But he also understood that the Bible says that if the government calls you to fight, guess what you got to do? Fight. Well, he was stuck. He refuses to fight, but he also has to honor the government. So what do? He decided to become a medic and became one of the greatest heroes in American history, and he never fired a bullet in his life. It's interesting. That's where this article is. It's why it's so broad. It's such a deep theological issue when it comes to this. But you need to understand, one of the reasons why I'm not a pacifist and I love and support military is because according to Romans chapter 13, you are to go when the government tells you to go. It's part of it. Now, y'all, the truth is, and this is where it gets to be difficult. And this is where you just sort of have to pray for your own conscience sake. Does every war our country call us to, is it just? No. So you have to make a decision if you're going to do it or not. Because we're not supposed to follow our worldly authorities if they tell us to go against Scripture. And so that's why I enjoy the movie Hacksaw Ridge, because that one, he actually you see a live example of him battling this. What am I supposed to do in this situation? And he did what he believed his conscience should have allowed him to do. And the reality is, I believe God blessed him. I don't believe there's no way he accomplished what he did without God helping him. Anybody that knows his story, it boggles the human mind what he did. And I believe he had spiritual help the whole time through it. Regardless, you have to make that decision on your conscience. But who has the authority? They have the authority. Something else I want to say. Notice I said foreign and domestic. This is something that led me to write a long post on social media just the other day about it when it comes to capital punishment. Our government has the right to do capital punishment. It's foreign and domestic. There are some people in this world that are just evil, y'all. There are serial killers out there that you can't do nothing with. And like the one I put on, there are some people that will do things to children that are unspeakable. Just the lowest of evil that you can even imagine. And it is our government's responsibility to handle them and to take care of them and protect us from them. And they have the right to do it. We also have the right. I have to remind people all the time, especially I have many pastors that are my friends, dear friends, who are pacifists. And they get on to me all the time because I'm not. I carry a gun with me a lot. I don't carry one when I'm at church because I got great brothers in here that are armed right now. and I love you. I don't carry, I'll have a knife on me sometimes, or most of the time, but I don't carry a gun with me. But when I'm out in public, 9 times out of 10, I'm within reach of a weapon at some point. And I have people that will get on to me about it, but let me remind you what Jesus said. Luke 22:36. But now, whoever has a money bag should take it, and also a traveling bag. And whoever doesn't have a sword should sell his robe and buy one. Why would Jesus tell his disciples to buy a sword? That's it. He never wanted them to go. Peter cut the dude's ear off, and Jesus corrected him for it. It was not Peter's responsibility to cut that soldier's ear off. We're not to be the aggressor. But Jesus Christ did not make us doormats either. We have the right, in fact, I believe the biblical right to protect our families. God gave me a daughter. I told my wife last night, sometime this week, because God bless my daughter. She's like every other daughter, or every other kid, teenager. They push limits. Y'all teenagers ever push limits? No, of course not. Mine does. She knows that she has a curfew, and I don't play with that curfew. If you are a minute late, you late. That's just the way it is, the way my mama did me. I didn't like it, but I understand now as a parent. Now it's my turn to do it. Well, my daughter, she's just like me. She's so smart. She knows that I like to go to the gym, and I tell her all the time, you need to go to the gym. You need to work on it gives you, your physical helps you mentally, spiritually. This is a good thing. You need to go to the gym. Oh, she's so smart. She goes, Dad, I don't really have time to go to the gym except after work, and I don't get off of work until 8 o'clock. Now, the truth is, I know she's going for social reasons. She don't care one bit about trying to grow muscle or anything like that. So she's playing games with me. And the reason I'm telling y'all this story is this, and I'll tell you later in private how that conversation ended, but you can only imagine. But I told my wife, I said, I'm telling you now, well, I know there's security cameras in that gym, and I know the door's locked. I don't trust everybody in that gym. And there's a possibility my daughter will be alone in that gym. And I'm not comfortable with this. And then I looked at my wife and I said something, and y'all will probably understand me, but I said, if somebody hurts her, God have mercy on them. And may God have mercy on me, because I'm probably going to do something really stupid. And she laughed and she says, well, I wouldn't blame you. Thank you. Because I probably will. Now, I hope I would do the right thing, but I just don't know. Thank God I've never been in that situation. I hope I never am in that situation. But that's what I'm saying here. I have a right, let me get back to the main point. I have a right to defend my daughter. I understand pacifism, but I think you're insane if you think God gave you a child and you allow harm to come to that child. I don't believe that. Never. You have the right to defend them violently if necessary. And that's just where I am on that situation. I have brothers that we disagree biblically on a lot of stuff, and that's one of them. One of the things that I want to end when it comes to this article is this. I love how this Baptist Faith and Message says there's only one remedy. I love that. It makes it absolutely clear. Did y'all catch it in the Baptist Faith and Message article on peace and war where it says there's one remedy? What's the remedy? Jesus, the Prince of Peace. It makes it absolutely clear that the Prince of Peace is the only one. And so what I want to do is explain how can they make such a bold statement. How bold is it to say that Christianity is the only option? Christianity is the only way. Well, let me explain it to you. Let's go with some of the world religions that are out there. Islam. Islam is not a religion of peace. I don't care what anybody says. I know they try to spin it, but I'm just telling y'all, I have a copy of the Quran in my office if you want to read it. It is there. It is in English, so you can read it. It is not one of peace. Islam literally translates submission. That is exactly what it means, submission. And the Quran calls all Muslims everywhere to use whatever force necessary to make people believers. And if they do not become believers, you have the right to kill them. That is what it clearly says. They will force Sharia law. It is a fact. Islam cannot solve the problems of humanity. It is not a source of peace. And so if you want peace on this earth, their form of peace is you kill people who do not submit. That's it. That is not how you're going to bring peace to this world. So Islam is not an option for peace. When it comes to Hinduism and Buddhism, somebody doesn't know I'm a preacher. Hinduism and Buddhism. Here's the thing when it comes to Hinduism and Buddhism. It is a very peaceful and pacifist religion. Buddhism and Hinduism is. Very peaceful, very much pacifist. There's only one problem when it comes to it. Now, I compare the two together because I've already done a study on Buddhism and Hinduism, and I want y'all to remember that Buddhism is an offshoot of Hinduism. All right? You had to hint Buddha himself was a Hindu. He just didn't agree on their way to get to nirvana, the state of nothingness. And so that's how Buddhism got started. But they all have the same core beliefs and the same root. And here it is. If you remember, it's a radically different type of religion. They believe in reincarnation. And so you're based on your karma. If you do bad in the world, you reincarnate into a lesser creature and you suffer. And your sufferings will pay for your bad karma, which we would call sin, your bad karma, and then you would reincarnate to something better. And if you do good, you reincarnate to something better. And if you do good, you reincarnate to something better. On and on and on and on until nirvana. You're a cow before then, but because that's the most holy creature. I'm not joking. You can't eat McDonald's. It's the only McDonald's in the world they don't sell beef. Yeah. And so, I mean, you just ain't going to get there. There's no double quarter pounder in India, all right? And it's because the cow is the most sacred of all creatures. It's the last step before nirvana. Nothing. That is heaven for them. Nothing. You no longer exist. So, with that understanding, if I saw somebody hurting you, according to the doctrines of Buddhism and Hinduism, I'm not allowed to stop them from hurting you because they're hurting you because of your karma. And you must suffer to pay for your karma, or the next reincarnation, you're not going to be any better because you didn't pay and suffer for your karma. And so if I stop you, your next life is going to be just as miserable. And so I'm going to let you suffer. That's Hinduism and Buddhism. Is that the way to peace of the world? No. And so, what does that leave? Well, that leaves Judaism and Christianity. Well, we just did a study through Hinduism. All of Judaism points to who? Christ. We are an offshoot of Judaism. Just as Hinduism and Buddhism, you got Judaism and Christianity. We are the natural offshoot of Christianity. Everything in the old was a shadow pointing to the new. And so, the article clearly states the only way for peace to come into this world is the Prince of Peace. Christianity is that way. No other religion calls us to love one another to the point of laying down your life for another. There is no other religion that does that. There is no other religion of a gospel that offers forgiveness of sins and the total transformation of an individual. There is no other religion that offers that. If people around the world would accept the gospel of Jesus Christ and make Jesus their Lord and Master and actually strive to follow Him, there would be no war. Wouldn't. Because everyone would follow the just war principles. And so it would be the end. It would be peace. Now, let's ask the obvious question. Is everybody going to become a Christian? No. So guess what we're going to have in this world? Wars. Jesus even said before the end comes, there will be rumors of what? Wars. There will be plenty of wars, y'all. There's always going to be war. And the reason why is because we live in a fallen and broken world. And as long as we're here, we're commanded to be light and salt. We're to be peacemakers and to seek peace and to be radically different. But that doesn't mean we're a doormat either, that you can just walk over us. We can defend ourselves, but we're never to be the aggressors unless it falls under that just war thing. So Christian people throughout the world should pray, just as it says in here, pray for the reign of the Prince of Peace. That's how this article ends. And I will close by quoting Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. And it says this is peace on earth. This is a prophecy of what's to come. Isaiah 2:4. You'll recognize it. He will settle disputes among the nations and provide arbitration for many peoples. They will turn their swords into plows and their spears into pruning knives. Nations will not take up the sword against another nation, and they will never again train for war. That's what's going to happen when the Prince of Peace comes back. All the wars will end then. And so that is why the Baptist Faith and Message clearly says the goal of Christianity is to seek peace. Peace. But we understand there will be no peace until the Prince of Peace reigns. Any questions? It's a big subject, deep subject. Any questions? You can start to see that as the Baptist Faith and Message, this is a living document. It's sort of like our Constitution. It can be amended. Every time we have a convention, sometimes we make amendments to these. And these later ones that we're getting into are all amendments. All right? These are been added on. And so this one got added on after some of the wars because it came up. You had preachers that are pacifists, preachers that are not pacifists, and they were arguing. And so this is why this article got written. Any questions about this? Any questions?
In my understanding, the Japanese honor their ancestors. Is there a name for that belief or religion?
You're talking about honoring their, most Japanese are Buddhist. There's Zen Buddhist, and there's 3 or 4 different denominations of Buddhists, and they don't call themselves I'm just giving you English terminology for it. It's like a denomination, and most Japanese are Buddhist, most of them. Sort of like most Hindus are in India, most Buddhists are in Japan. And so their honoring of their ancestors would be that. Is where they would get that from. Other questions?
What if there's a clause for a just war and the government doesn't declare it?
It's a great question. That's where you're going to have to, that's where you just, like Hacksaw Ridge, you're going to have to make a determination. Because the only way for a just war to happen is the proper authorities to say it. And if our government refuses to do it, then we would be stepping out of line to do so. And so it would not fall under the category of a just war. Now, again, you'd have to just allow your conscience to do it. Because I understand what you're saying. Like, let's just say, for example, it did actually happen, World War II. World War II, America refused to get in the fight. The only reason America got in the fight is because they bombed Pearl Harbor. And had they not bombed Pearl Harbor, we never would have gotten into that fight until Hitler came to us. And had they not struck us, we never would have done anything, and Europe would have been lost. There's no way they'd have won that war without us. And so that's a good question. Now you're starting to see why this is why Southern Baptist conventions can get pretty interesting. It's a lot of deep stuff. And this is one of those articles that's really deep. Questions like you just asked, it's a tough one. But technically, we're not supposed to fight until the government says so, because they're the ones that have the sword. But, see, there's like, for example, when the government becomes tyrannical itself, now you've got, see, that's a whole other situation. There's so many nuances to this. There's so many different avenues. It can be very difficult. The goal is to strive for peace at all times. That's why that article notice the just war that I mentioned from Augustus of Hippo is not in the Baptist Faith and Message, because not all Baptists hold to it. I just gave it to y'all. It's the only one that's out there. I like it. I think it's good. But there are Baptists that don't believe in a just war, and the whole idea of it. And so that's why it's not in the Baptist Faith and Message. And so it just depends.